Curt Curtiss. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you having me over here.
Sure thing, anytime.
So I'm glad you decided to do this because not everybody can see the whole room here, and we'll try to get some B-roll, but this is pretty fantastic setup you have here.
This has been a work in progress. This is something, we had a large house in Brentwood that had a drive-in basement, which was about 3,000 square feet. Then I had my 4-car garage up top for dailies. But the house was way too big, and so we always had a vision to have a slightly smaller house, which is now turned into a bigger house, but that's another story. And this was basically a 30 by 80 pole barn, just open, had 2 horse stalls in here.
I don't see any horses in here.
No, we turned the horse farm into a horsepower farm.
Yes, okay.
And so it was a progress that we decided, I mean, this was dirt floors, it was an angled hill, I mean, it was miserable. And people thought I was nuts taking on a project like this because they're like, no, there's no way this thing's going to be a cool place.
Yeah. Well, you did a wonderful job.
But when you're up here on the hill, I mean, we have, in the distance, we can see 10 miles. That's as far as we can see the castle from our place. And we're out here in Eagleville.
Yeah.
So the views were the whole deal. We really wanted to build a Ferris Bueller Day Off garage, which had commercial windows, you know, floor to ceiling.
Would you put the Ferrari in there?
Yeah, I would have to get a fake Ferrari, like they had. But we happen to live in an HOA community, and they felt that looked a little too commercial. So we compromised on 7-foot tall windows because we wanted to have a lot of natural light in here. I'm kind of the cave person. I could live in a cave, but when you have the views like this, my wife is, you got to put windows in it. And so that was spot on. She had a great idea.
Yeah.
And then I was going to put a regular garage door in, and she's like, oh, no, we got to put a glass garage door in. Of course, the HOA decided that wasn't acceptable. We had to have a residential door. So, hope they don't hear this, but for the first 6 months I was here, we put the glass door in, and then I got white vinyl and put it on the bottom sections to make it look like a more traditional garage door.
Yeah.
And then it's amazing over time how the vinyl just
kind of
fell off,
weathered off, and made its way off.
And so now we have a full glass garage door, which really adds to the nicety of the way that.
Well, and I love the natural light just shining off of all these cars, especially this one. And tell us, because you have a number of cars in here, and I was asking when we first got here, like, which one has the best story? And this one seems to have the best story.
Yep.
Okay.
This was the very first full build that I ever did.
Okay.
And in 2012, I had turned 50, and I told my wife I wanted to build a cool car. I wanted to build an old Corvette.
Why the Corvette?
Well, that all started when I got out of the military and I bought my first house. I was in the Air Force, bought my first house in Maryland, and my next door neighbor who built a house after me was collecting one of every generation of Corvette. So that kind of sparked my interest in Corvettes. At that point in time, I was building big jacked up Toyota trucks, Jeeps. I was the ultimate redneck.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then my wife told me I couldn't be a redneck anymore.
No.
So no more trucks.
At that point. More colored shirts, maybe.
She was okay with the t-shirts, but the problem was the jacked up trucks. So she goes, you can have all the cool cars you want, but no jacked up trucks. So I'm like, okay. So then I bought a Corvette in 1987 Corvette. I bought in like 1989 maybe. And ever since then, I've always had a Corvette, mostly modern Corvettes. I'd never had an old one. And I always had in the back of my mind what my neighbor was doing, building that, every generation of Corvette. So he had a C1, a C2, C3, and they were all projects. Yeah. And so I thought, well, now's my time while I'm still kind of young to build a project. So she got tired of hearing about it, and she says, just go find one. So I found 2 Corvettes in Texas, of all things, Austin, Texas. This car, I found one other one. Actually, the other one is the car I went to go look at. The other one turned out to be had a rear end damage. We put it on the lift, and the same guy had both of them. And then I was like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to fight a damaged vehicle.
Yeah,
Like, well, you really got to look at this car. And this car had the ugly on it. It was done as a 1970s or 80s Pink Floyd themed car. So it had Pink Floyd album stuff painted on it. It had Dark Side. It was called Dark Side.
That's hilarious.
And it had brass knuckles for the wire looms. It had a little crack pipe to hold down the air cleaner.
Get out of here.
It had 69 on the wheel caps. So the shifter was brass knuckles. So
was it the guy you bought it from? Was he the original owner?
He was not. He bought it out of Ohio, and it was a World of Wheels show car at one point. This thing had a big hood on it, which we have hanging on the wall, big, and it had nitrous at one point, and then it had a big wing on the back of it.
Really?
The ugliest wing you've ever seen, and then it had one of the album covers painted on the back of the trunk, and it had side pipes, and it was jacked up just a little bit with these.
That's hilarious.
Crazy rims.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is not the car I'm coming home with. That car is just butt ugly.
Yeah.
And so after we talked it over a little bit, I took it for a drive. We put it on a lift. Everything looked pretty good. It had never been hit. I was like, okay, I can do something with this. I'll take it home.
What motor did it have in it?
It had a pretty hopped up 350 in it.
Okay.
And so I thought, okay, this is going to be kind of an easy project. I was not expecting a full frame off. I was expecting to come home, knock the ugly off of it, and drive it. Well, it came home, and when I got it home, it came off the tow truck, and the guy says it won't start. I'm like, well, why won't it start? He's like, I don't know. So I pull all the spark plugs out, and gasoline pours out of the cylinders. It had an electric fuel pump, and the driver on whoever transported it left the ignition on, and the gas pump, I guess the angle allowed the gas pump to keep running and drop into the cylinder. So my block was full of gas. So I drained all the oil out, and I put fresh oil in it, and the motor fired up.
Okay.
It was obnoxious. This car was just
loud and
crazy.
Hell yeah.
And so I was living in a pretty respectable neighborhood. They had not finished the construction in it. And so I took my wife and let's go for a drive around the block.
Quick ride, yeah.
So I drive around the block and get up to the cul-de-sac, and I see this very nice couple sitting there looking at the open lot there. And I'm looking at Debbie and I'm like,
there goes the neighborhood, right?
They're not moving here.
Yeah.
And come to find out, they did buy the lot. And he was a car guy.
He told his wife, this guy's pretty cool.
He's like, man, we're in. They got cars.
This is my kind of neighborhood. Yeah, I'm in.
And so he turned out to be a really good friend who's since moved to Florida.
Oh, okay. That's good.
He's a Corvette guy, too, actually. So anyways, we took the car back up, and I said, I just don't trust the engine. And I thought, well, after it had all that gas in it, who knows what it did, the bearings and all that other stuff. So we took it down to the basement, in my basement garage in the other house, and Debbie and I literally started stripping the car apart. Like they do.
You and your wife?
Yep.
That's
so
awesome.
It was turned into our project. So we took the car apart. She cataloged everything and put it in Ziplocs. And then as I got deeper into it, I was like, oh, this is going to be more than just a paint job. We're going to have to do a bit more. So I decided to get the Crate 350, and I got a period set of dual 4 barrels that came with the car. I paid like $800 or something at the time for them, sent them off, had them rebuilt. And then there's a company that makes valve covers, because now a modern 350 is a PCV engine versus the old one had a downdraft. Okay. So I had to have drilled valve covers, but I wanted the period looking valve covers. So a company makes these period looking valve covers that are set up for a PCV. So I bought those.
So you were trying to make it as original looking as possible.
I wanted it to be an original looking car, knowing it wasn't going to be original, but then I also wanted to make it drivable. Yeah. So there was a company called Jim Myers Racing that made literally, and I'm not a welder, so I needed a bolt-in. So there was a company that made this bolt-in, rack and pinion steering, modern front end with coilovers. All right. And so I was able to, with 16 bolts, you can take that old truck front end out, which is literally what they had. Chevrolet used their truck front end.
I didn't know that.
With crazy A-arm setups. So I took all that out, put a rack and pinion in it, put coilovers in it. Then I got to thinking, well, maybe I need air conditioning. So we put vintage air in. Then I got thinking, well, the 4-speed, maybe we need a 5-speed. So because it had a 411 posi rear that just had been rebuilt, and the 4-speed would just go like 55 miles an hour. So put a 5-speed in it. And then came, okay, well, we're going to have to take this thing down to bare fiberglass because it looks really bad. The paint was so thick on it that they painted with all this airbrushing and stuff. So I bought a soda blaster.
So you did all this yourself?
Did all of it myself,
Wow.
all in my backyard. Painted it and everything at the house.
Did this paint job?
Yeah, well, a friend of mine came to help.
Okay.
But we did it in a gravel floor with
Really?
plastic over it. Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
okay.
so that's why I say the story, backstory behind this car is crazy.
And obviously it means a lot to you because you and your wife worked on it and you did most of it yourself.
It was the first big build we ever did.
And I'm assuming this is something you probably would never sell.
No, this is a keeper, yeah.
Never. No matter what.
No.
Even if I was like, not me, but somebody was like, hey, this is exactly what I want.
No.
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 Okay. All right.
Yeah, this is definitely a keeper.
Okay.
And so out back, it took 600 pounds of baking soda to blast the paint off of this. So I got an Eastwood soda blaster, and I'm out there in the full gear, blasting this thing, getting all the paint off. I had tarps out so I could collect all the old paint and stuff. And then I thought, okay, I'm home free. Now we're just going to put some primer on it, do the work. And then I'm jacking the body up. I took the body off the chassis to do all this. I built a body cart. There's a guy that had plans to build this body cart, so I built this wooden structure with wheels so I could wheel it around. And I had to buy an aftermarket hood for it. And a bunch of chrome is aftermarket on this because you could get all this stuff aftermarket.
And that stuff, you can get that. I mean, you can go online, you can find any of this stuff. Okay.
Yeah, Corvette Central, one of those companies.
Yeah.
The only thing you can't get for this car are the rear bumpers. The rear bumpers, you had to have a good set of rear bumpers because they have the exhaust that goes through them and they're very ornate.
All right.
But everything else you can get. These trim rings around the headlights, you want to use originals because the aftermarkets stick up a little bit.
Just a little bit. They couldn't get that right?
Couldn't get that right. So,
and how much are the aftermarket ones?
They're all the parts were fairly reasonable on the car, I'd say. All the stainless goes down the hood, all the stainless on the sides, all these emblems, they sell reproduction.
And you can't tell the difference. I mean, maybe somebody could, right?
Somebody maybe. A lot of the Corvette Central stuff looks identical to the factory stuff. Okay. So I was working on all this, and as I'm moving the body around, I'm noticing that the rear trunk section is flexing a little more than I thought. And so didn't think anything of it. And then I start vacuuming the inside of the car out. And it has, in the rockers, there's these little cutout holes. And I'm thinking the car is all fiberglass. What could be wrong? So I'm sucking the vacuum cleaner, and these big chunks of rust are coming out, like just broken pieces of steel all rusted. I'm like,
they're shooting up the vacuum.
Oh, they're coming, sticking caught in my vacuum. I'm like, what the heck is this? And I'm looking at it, and then as I find out later, the sides of these cars, inside the rocker panels, under the fiberglass, there is a C-channel piece of steel that's about 6 or so inches tall. And mine had rusted through halfway through, and that was causing the instability. And I'm like, I'm not prepared to fix this. I've never done this in my life. So I became YouTube certified.
Hey, there's everything. Everything
Corvette
you need.
Forum and YouTube helped me build this car. I'd never done this before. I mean, I worked on cars. I've always worked on, tinkered on stuff, but more mechanical. Never body, never major
That's
stuff.
kind of an art, right? I mean, you got to be.
It is.
Yeah.
And so I ended up finding the parts. I managed to only have to take the inner skin off. Do it the traditional way, you take the outer skin off. I did not want to mess with the outer skin of the car. So I was able to take the inner skin off, slide it in there, and use aircraft rivets to hold it in, because the firewall is steel, and aircraft rivets to the steel, to the firewall. So I got that all done. And then I start talking to a buddy of mine, Dennis, who used to paint cars years ago. And that's back when the old paint guns were the suction cups and old school stuff, the Binks spray guns. Yeah. And so I said, hey, Dennis, if I pay you, will you come do body work and kind of help me paint the car and stuff? I did all the rough fiberglass work and got it to where it was shaped right, and then he came in and kind of made it look pretty with a little skim and a little bit of primer, high build primer. Did all the blocks. He did all the block sanding, and then I bought all of this modern technology paint guns, Iwata LPH 400s, and I did the disposable cups. I mean, I went all out on this stuff, and I hand it to Dennis, and Dennis looks at it and he's like, "What's this?"
This is the stuff you need. Get it done.
So I'm the paint mixologist. I'm mixing all the paint, and he's just the sprayer. And so he goes out there, and the first time he shot with that gun, he's used, with the old guns, they were 45 pounds of pressure, and you could shoot 20 inches away. And the new guns, because they're low pressure, low volume, you have to be about 12 inches away. And it took a little getting used to for him to
Did he
do
practice on something? I'm sure.
This.
Did he first? Okay, let's go. Here we go.
This is a base coat, clear coat car. So, so we went through, and sure enough, in a couple of weeks, we had the paint on it, and he did the cut and buff, and it still looks fantastic. And this was done in 2012.
Really? Now you were saying it's a small block Chevy.
Yes.
Right?
This.
Does it still have the small block?
Still has a small block Chevy.
Oh, it's the other one you can't see.
The LS.
Oh, okay, so you still have the. Okay, for some reason I got those two mixed up.
Yeah.
Okay, so you want to keep it that way, 100%.
No, not really.
No.
In hindsight, here's the next thing. In hindsight, I wish I had done a full chassis on it, because after this car had been undercoated, and I was like, the front was great, and so the last thing I did on the car was to restore the chassis. And the body's all waiting to go on it, and I'm going and I'm scraping the undercoating off. And as I scrape the undercoating off in the back of the chassis, I realized that the kick-ups and the crossbeam is rusted out pretty much. So I had to get another guy to come in. I could buy the replacement parts. So a guy came in and he welded all new stuff in, cut anything bad out. But in hindsight, I would have been much better off getting a chassis, putting a small LS in it.
Yeah.
And I had a deal on an LS a few weeks ago that I almost got.
For this?
And I was going to do a full chassis and an LS on this. Even today, if I could find the right LS motor, because you can get a chassis for these for $7,500, and then go get a donor C4 Corvette and just put all the donor stuff under it, which you could get the front and rear sections for $1,500.
So if you could go back and knowing what you know now, you might do something a little different.
I would have, knowing that I didn't want to keep it in an original car.
You would have done
so
that.
far from numbers matching.
Yeah.
That my goal originally was like, I want it to look original, but I don't want it to drive original.
I mean, right?
And so I wanted to keep all of the artistic features of the car. All the interior looks somewhat period. The seats are aftermarket. I'm a tall guy, so I don't fit in these cars real well.
Yeah, because your steering wheel is going to be pretty close to you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this has an aftermarket steering column. I did it, makes a column that looks like a factory column. I still have the big wheel in it. I didn't get a smaller wheel, but I did do seats. A company called Alnock, or Wise Guy Frames, makes a seat that's made for these cars, but they carve out the seat to where you have 2 more inches of seating headroom and 2 more inches of depth.
Okay.
And so this has made this car super drivable
night and day,
for me.
right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and they're comfortable.
So what do you think your best story, besides working on it and building it and getting it to where it is today? Like, do you have a really fun story with this car? Like,
gosh,
just cruising around. I mean, do you drive it a lot?
Yeah, I've got 7,000 miles on it since I finished it. So I mean, it gets maybe 600 to 1,000 a year.
Right.
But we have multiple cars.
Yeah. So when you wake up and you have like a cruising or whatever you want to call them, do you kind of come out here and be like?
The only problem is it depends on the temperature outside, because this has dual 4 barrels on it. And the dual 4 barrels in hot weather, I run ethanol-free gas.
Okay.
And in hot weather, the bowls will boil and it runs like crap.
Okay.
So I have to figure out, it has to be cooler days when I take it out. And that's one reason I'd love to do an LS or a fuel injection on it.
Just start it and go.
Start it and go. This is the last car I have that's carbureted other than the old Auburn.
Which I can't wait to show. And okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. So you also called that the fishtail, is that what you called it?
Boat tail.
Boat tail.
Yep.
So walk me through this one.
So the boat tail Speedster, it's a 1933. That's the last year for that body style. We also had a 1931 Auburn 4-door Phaeton, but the boat tail Speedster got a flathead straight 8, about 105 horsepower.
I know.
Little bit of a slug. It's part of the Auburn Cord Duesenberg family. Right. So this is more of the production version of a Duesenberg per se. Back in the day, of course, with all the the wars and metal shortages, and there's not many of these left out there.
How many would you say?
Oh gosh, the boat tail speedsters. I mean, they only made a few dozen of them.
Really?
Now this is a rebody.
Yeah.
This was a factory rebody, and they made 12 factory rebodies, which we have one of.
How long did you have? How long have you had this one?
We've had that one. Gosh, we bought it 7 years ago, probably.
And I think I asked you before. Now you drive it, but not very often because it's tough.
It's got a sticky brake on it right now,
Okay.
but even when it is working, it's 50-mile-an-hour car. I mean, it's not something you're going to jump out and go.
Just go get some coffee or something.
No, it's work.
Okay, it's a lot of work.
But it is the most gorgeous piece of art in my garage.
It's and it's the closest to the door. So first thing you see when you walk in, I love it. And next to that one, you have the LS Corvette. Now, what's going on there?
That's a 63 split window Corvette. I had an original numbers matching 63 Corvette, and I always thought that I wanted to do a resto mod because the original just wasn't that fun to drive. They're okay.
327 or something?
327, and it was a base model. And my buddy started, after he saw me building cars, because I'd built a 56 Corvette resto mod in between these cars that I sold.
You're a Corvette guy. You're a Chevy guy, right?
A Chevy guy,
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
Well, becoming Porsche guy, but yeah. But so my buddy started this project. He bought a donor car that was running and driving, but a tree had fallen and messed up some of the trim. It was non-numbers matching. He bought a very expensive tri-tubular chassis, a brand new LS motor. He took the body off, stripped it all down to bare fiberglass, and then stalled. And he's a real good friend of mine. And one day I was joking with him. I said, Matt, you're not going to do anything with that car. Why don't you sell it to me?
Yeah, I'll take good care of it.
Piped up. Are you serious? I was like, oh, well, I guess I am now.
Yeah.
So we came up with a dollar figure to buy a very expensive box of parts.
Yeah.
And people thought I was crazy buying that very expensive box of parts. I had it about 4 or 5 years. It kind of got in between projects. And then about 2 years ago, I finished. It took about a year to finish. And that car now is very comparable to a car that goes through Barrett-Jackson for $350,000.
Wow.
So it's that level of a build that I did to it. Has the right chassis, has the right drivetrain. Again, you look at it from the outside, you look inside, everything looks period. It's not over customized.
Yeah, sure.
And that's what attracts a lot of people to it, because now they can jump in it and it drives just like a C5 Corvette.
It just looks like that.
Just looks like that.
I love that. I love that.
And so that's one of my favorite cars to drive. I mean, it just...
Is that a manual?
It's an automatic. It came with an automatic. So, and the other thing is, me being tall, I have less room in that than I do in this.
Really?
And so me being so tall, I would have struggled with a manual, I think.
Okay. So if you, since you're apparently a Corvette guy, what would you say like the ultimate Corvette would be for you?
So this is probably the ultimate.
That's it.
That is,
okay.
Yeah.
That's my favorite body style.
Yeah, it is. This is my wife's favorite body style.
Does she? Which one does she drive?
This
is like her. Okay.
Yeah, this is the one she will jump in and go anywhere in.
That's awesome. And there's a couple newer Corvettes right there, but then there's a great story with that GMC, right?
Yes.
That's been in the family for a while?
It's been in the family for as long as I can remember. I can remember as far back as it's been in my cousin's side of the family. And his mom and her sister used to deliver newspapers on that thing.
Here in town?
No, it was in Van Nuys, California.
All right.
And so,
California truck then.
Yep.
Okay.
So that was a long bed. And one sister would drive and the other would stand on the side step and throw newspapers out. And the one story that I'll never forget is one day the sister came home and the other sister was missing. She fell off the truck.
What? Because she was throwing them and she turned a corner and she just fell. And I was assuming back then they didn't have cell phones. Like, hey, I fell off.
No. So she had to backtrack and go figure out where she dropped her sister off. So
Is she just standing on the side waiting?
I guess. And then my cousin used to run a pool cleaning service out of that truck. It got pretty beat up and dented, but it was, being a California truck, had very little rust. It just looked horrible when I got it.
So how did you end up getting it and how long
So I've kind of been pestering my cousin for a 64 Cadillac that my grandfather had, and he hasn't wanted to part with that yet. So he said, well, my aunt's got a couple of these cars. He had a Mustang and had this truck, and I always kind of wanted to build a truck. And so we were thinking about it. He never really committed to it. So I bought a 1950 Chevrolet project truck, 50 Chevrolet 5-window. And literally a week after I bought that, he called me and says, you ready for that truck? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
So that truck came and it sat for 8 years waiting for other projects to get done. Because I finished the 55 window, sold it because I realized I was too big for that truck. I should really
How tall are you?
6'1".
Okay.
I should really sit in vehicles before you
buy them or build them. Yeah.
Yeah. Or waste 8 months of my life.
I sat in my first like Cobra. He was at
the blue one.
Yeah, I think he lives in my neighborhood because I just saw him live at cruise because I'd never seen it before at the Cars and Coffee, and I was out on the deck and I saw it in number 56, maybe I can't remember.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
It was blue. I was like, I think he's my neighbor, but he let me sit in it.
Oh wow.
And I was like, are you sure? And I sat in it, and I think getting out was harder. But like I always wanted one of those, but it is a little tight. So I
always wanted to build one of those, and then it just never really came to. And then I always wanted to build one of the Daytona kit cars.
Oh yeah. Now, would you put a Chevy in that?
Yeah, that would be a tough one. I would LS it probably.
Yeah. Would you?
Yeah.
I think people are doing it. I mean, it's not, if you're doing a kit, is it really a Ford anymore?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just kind of whatever.
Well, there's so many of the kit Auburns, too, that have.
Oh, really?
They make there was a couple of companies that make a reproduction Auburn, and they would have either Lincoln V8s in them or Chevrolet V8s. One of my friends has one. Really cool cars. It's the next generation of this, like a 1935, 36, because Auburn went out of business in 36.
There is a little bit more room in here.
Well, the bosses said no.
The boss said no?
Now, if I find, I could get away with one more project if I wanted to. I'm trying to decide if I want another project. Projects find me.
Sure.
My 56 Corvette found me. I was building this, and a good friend of mine in Alabama who was building some Corvettes ran into a little bit of financial issue, started a 56 Corvette, didn't finish it. It already had the chassis and then a bare glass body, very similar to this project. And so I bought another expensive box of parts and finished that car out. My buddy Dennis helped me paint that car too. The truck, I actually did a lot of the paint myself on that one. Dennis is retired. He will not paint for me anymore. He says, I've had enough.
You had enough. I'm done. I'm done helping this guy.
So
will you go paint one of his cars maybe? Does he have anything fun?
No, he's got a late model Corvette. He's into modern stuff now.
All right, okay.
He would love to have one of the old Corvettes, but...
I want to get into a little bit of your insurance business, but I think this might be a good question for you. Is what do you think is happening with the classic car market as people who enjoy them are getting a little bit older, and is the younger generation getting into them? And if so, what are they buying?
So what's happening is I call them the kind of the big wheel, the pre-war cars.
Yeah.
If it's a special car like that, they're holding value. They're not really increasing. If a car like this, people want to be able to drive them and enjoy them. The older people who want originals are falling out.
Okay.
So if it's an original car, the resto mods are by far surpassing the value of an original.
This car with an LS or something like that, which
yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So like my split window, an original split window. When I sold mine 6 years ago, I struggled to get $98,000 for it.
Okay.
Now that car would be $125,000 probably, where this car is 300 plus. So it really, now does it take a lot to build one of these?
Sure.
Yes. Do I have 300 in it? No. But if I paid somebody to do it, I would probably have that 300 in it.
All right. Well, so now, do you think that as people get old, there's generational cars, I guess that's the right word for it, right? I think when you get a certain age, you're like, you know what? I always wanted this car. I can afford it now. Maybe it's 20 years when you wanted it, right?
Right.
So I'm assuming as the younger generation gets older, maybe they're 70s, 80s kids, and my neighbor had a 80-something IROC Camaro. I always wanted one. And do you think are those getting more popular?
They are. And that story holds true. My neighbor, when he was young, his neighbor had a Jaguar E-Type, silver red interior. Always wanted one.
Always wanted one. He's like, I can get one now.
So he got one now. Now, the only problem with that is he elected to get an original one, which it was the most expensive $9,000 Jaguar you've ever seen. Paid $9,000 for it, but it only cost him $100 to restore it.
Oh my God! Yeah. Did he rest him on it or no?
No, he brought it back, and then it constantly would have an oil leak or something, and he's not mechanically inclined to fix that. So he decided that it was time to just trade it on a C8 Corvette.
Yeah, he's like, you know what, I'm done with this thing.
But a lot of people, if they don't get a resto mod and they don't get a good quality resto mod, they get into it and they get very discouraged because it does leak oil.
Yeah.
It might have a little extra play in the steering wheel compared to a modern car. The air conditioning may not blow as cold.
Yeah.
And then they kind of like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? And then they're flipping it and selling it.
But I think that's also part of the adventure, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not supposed to be like that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're not buying an old original car and expect it to drive like, especially cars today.
Well, some people don't know what they're getting.
Yeah.
They've never driven in one, so their
I'm gonna look cool.
expectations are way different than reality.
Sure.
And so that changes stuff. Then there are people that just love to have a piece of art that pulls in their garage and they never drive it, but my God, that thing looks good in there.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, I think there's lots of people that do just that, and just it is a piece of art. It's a working piece of art.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen I have two totally different ones. Like one, like I'm not afraid to park it anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid if a branch hits it. The other one, a little bit more careful.
See, where I have a different philosophy on cars, I look at them as they are my rolling 401k, because at some point.
But you're never going to sell this.
Well, that's one.
Okay.
No, but if you invest properly in your cars, you should not lose money. Mm-hmm. You may make some, depending on the cars. I mean, it really, over time will tell. But the majority of the cars I have now, the C8 Corvette's the exception. That's the depreciating one. You buy a new car, it's going to depreciate. Sure. Where I've got my 2019 Corvette Grand Sport. Very special car. Last of the front engine Corvettes, last of the manual transmission Corvettes. So that's a very desirable car, will be for many, many years. So you have to consult with somebody that understands that particular mark of car, and it could be a very good investment for you. So, even if you lose a little bit, you're enjoying it. Where can you put your 401k in a bank? You can't drive it.
You're just looking at the computer. Oh, this is
and
great.
You're hoping that it doesn't crash one day.
You're like, let me look at this, or you look at that. I mean, it's.
But so I really look at them as rolling 401ks, and that's kind of how I got into the collector car insurance business. Because the way I look at it is, if I'm out driving this and an uninsured Joe Schmo hits me, I want to make sure that my 401k is replenished when it gets totaled out.
Yeah.
And so everything we do is agreed value on these cars. So this car is $125,000. If anything happens to it, they'll stroke me a check for $125,000. My 401k is replenished. I can buy another car. I can do whatever I want. Where traditional insurance, you're not going to get that.
No. Well, so, I'm not going to say who I'm insured with right now, but I'm going with you now. But when I was on the phone with him, and I still don't understand this, and maybe you can explain it to me better. So both of my Scouts have LS in them, right? So there was something additional you can pay for, I think, per year to where you actually...
Cherish salvage.
So if it's totaled... I get it, as opposed to they just take it.
Right.
Like even if I wanted the fender to hang on my wall because it's it means a lot to me.
Yeah.
They'll take it and then they sell it and
So what'll happen is that's Hagerty. I represent Hagerty. Hagerty is a big part of my business. What they do is if the car is older than 5 or 10 years old, there are limits to where they'll allow you to do it, and it's state by state, but most states allow it. And it's called Cherish Salvage. It's 15% on an annual basis of what your comprehensive is. Mm-hmm. And so I believe it's comprehensive. And so what happens with that, or comp collision, what happens is if that car gets totaled out, then they will stroke you a check for your agreed value and you get to keep the car. If you have a very rare car, like Auburn as an example, where you can't do anything with it, you can't get those parts. You have to make parts for those cars. So if that car were to get broadsided and totaled out, I have a very expensive engine, I have very expensive wheels, things like that. So they're now yours. Now, the other thing is, in many cases, and I've had a couple of clients that this has happened to, you never have to surrender the title, so it never gets branded as salvage. So you can actually rebuild that car, and you technically don't have a salvage car.
All right.
Now, in fairness, you should disclose that, but in reality, you do not have a branded title. You don't have to go get it re-inspected if you get it on the road, because the way insurance works is typically if your vehicle is damaged to 50% of the insured value or more, then they're going to total the vehicle.
Totally, yeah.
If it's less than 50%, in most cases, they will allow you to fix it. A lot of people don't do it because their car isn't that special. There's not uniqueness to it.
But, I mean, it maybe doesn't mean as much as it does to...
Exactly. If it's a sentimental vehicle, you want to have your family's vehicle back, you know, that kind of stuff.
So, so I would imagine, you've been in this business for a while and you're sure a lot of people. What's like one of the crazier stories with that? You don't have to say names or type of car, but like, was there a crazy car that was totaled or something? Really valuable car or...
Oh gosh, we've had Lamborghinis get hit in Target parking lots by old Ford F-100s. We've had
oh really?
Yeah. We had a vehicle at a shop that actually the shop caught on fire. A vehicle in the paint shop caught on fire. I had 4 different customer cars in there, man. And they all got smoke and soot damage. They didn't get fire damage. Well, one did get some heat damage, but they were all totaled out. In those cases, 2 of them were worthy of being repaired, and they were able to actually buy them back from the insurance company. So they'll give them a buyback fee. Basically what happens to the insurance cars is they're going to most likely end up at a Copart auction. So whenever
I've heard that name.
Yeah, so there's a family in town that's the founders of that, good friends of ours actually. And what happens is many of the insurance vehicles go to a Copart lot while they're determining if it's going to be totaled, repaired, or what have you. And so they're caretakers of the cars. Mm-hmm. And then in the event that the settlement has happened, 2 things can happen. You can ask for a buyout price on that car from the insurance company, and they'll tell you usually pretty reasonable. Mm-hmm. And it's based on what Copart sales have traditionally been. Or they'll ask Copart to go ahead and sell it, which Copart sells 1 car every 6 seconds during the business day on the internet. And those cars could go to an individual buyer that wants to. There's a lot of YouTubers buy Copart cars to rebuild.
Every 6 seconds? Every 6
seconds. The company's worth billions of dollars. It's a publicly traded company, lots all over the world.
Okay.
And they have got an operation that is just unbelievable. Electric cars now are accelerating their business because electric cars can get totaled with as low as 25% of the insured value.
What's your take on those electric cars?
No.
No.
No. I think hybrid is the way to go.
Sure, I agree.
I think the range anxiety of people is rough. I think that I have a cell phone, and in so many years, when the battery's crap, it goes away.
It goes away.
That's what's happening with electric cars, and it's interesting that Tesla's being the oldest electric cars out there. When they need batteries in 10 years. They're basically a disposable car. That's going to go to Copart. They're going to get parted out for wheels and tires and stuff. It's not worth a $18,000 battery pack on a $10,000 car. So you have a lot of disposability there. And we almost bought a Tesla. We got really, when they first came out, we got all excited. We were going to get a Model S with ludicrous mode and all that. We took it home overnight and got my friend sick on the highway, 0 to 60 stops. It was the most fun vehicle to drive. But then I came to reality, it's $118,000, and we looked at the depreciation curve on these cars. I have one client that has a Tesla Plaid. They paid $115,000, $120,000, and a month later, they dropped the prices on them to $89,000. So now new. So they're now underwater. So you're at the mercy of Elon, of what he's going to do with his pricing structure.
Have you seen what they've done with the Charger, the new Charger?
No.
You haven't heard?
Oh,
With the
they're going to come out with electric and gas
Are they?
options, I heard.
well, all I know is that the electric is going to have a speaker.
Oh, to make
So like, but it's I don't know where it is, but to kind of give you the feeling of I guess a gas powered car. But I was like, I mean, it's just
Well, and to be honest, we've had in the past when I did a corporate job and I needed to commute on HOV lanes, we bought a Toyota Prius because we could ride in the HOV lanes.
Oh.
That was actually being ugly. Aside from being ugly, that was a fantastic car.
yeah, it is pretty ugly.
But have you seen the new ones?
No, I don't really pay attention to those.
You should look at the new.
Really?
Even the exotic car YouTuber guys are looking at it saying that's a sexy car.
Really?
It is.
I mean, I would put looks wise, I would put the Prius along with the Aztec.
Yeah, the new Prius, very sleek, very aero. I mean, I would own one.
Really?
Yes.
I think maybe you should trade this in and get 4 or 5 of those.
But back to the electric cars, and I've got clients that have hybrid exotic cars. And those battery packs to replace on a LaFerrari is $250,000 to replace a battery pack on that. And they are due for battery packs. And even the results from Monterey Motor Week, some of the YouTube guys got together and started talking. They can't figure out why those exotic supercars that have these huge expenditures are still holding their value so well. Like McLaren P1s, Ferrari LaFerraris, SF90s, all of these cars, they're going to be they could be a brick at some point because some of the cars you can't even get batteries for. You got to find somebody to build you a retrofit set. So at some point, those exotic cars are going to be bricks. And
it's going to be
it's going to be a collection. Somebody will look at it.
Shine it and just look at it. This used to be really cool, but now it just kind of
where these cars you can get out and enjoy. So I'm a big no on solid electric. My neighbor just went through the Hummer EV, had it 3 months, couldn't do it. Now he's got a Bronco Raptor.
Yeah, I mean the Hummer EV. I mean, it's great technology, and I think it's really neat. But was it weigh 10,000 pounds, 9,000 pounds?
9,000 pounds.
I mean, it's just like,
but
I don't know.
Holy,
is it really
fast? 0 to 60 under 4 seconds.
What kind of power is that thing making? I mean,
almost 1,000.
Is it?
Yeah. But it'll raise up to 8 inches with a touch of a button.
And I love I don't know how to parallel park. Let me just hit this button. Yeah. Not my thing. No. But I don't think are they going away? I don't know.
I don't think they're going away, unfortunately. But I think that, and it has driven insurance prices up too, because for me and you, because what happens is you and I could hit one and total it out at 20% of the insured value. Our insurance company is going to have to pay for that payout.
Yeah.
Because and the reason they're totaling them out so soon is it's hard to get parts quickly, and if you can't have a car down for 6 months and give them a rental car, so they're going to just end up totaling it out. And in general, most of them are aluminum structure, and there's not a lot of body shops that are certified to repair a lot of these cars.
So would their premiums be more if you have
Their premiums are more.
Are they?
If I insured a Tesla a few weeks ago as a daily driver, and it was Model 3, $2,600 a year.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. Yeah, where he traded a truck that was $1,700 a year.
How about the Cybertruck?
That is the ugliest vehicle I've ever seen.
I mean, there's a few of them in town, and they're wrapping them white and black, and it's like, man,
well,
I don't know.
Kid Rock has one that's
it's the
General Lee.
General Lee. I see the same ones above my house, and it's like I get it, right? I totally get it. It's just totally off the wall.
Yep.
But boy, the more I look at it.
Somebody in our neighborhood has one.
Really?
And James stopped and talked to him and asked him why he got it.
Why'd you get that thing?
No, I honestly wanted to talk about it a little bit. And it turns out that he is buying the kit that will allow him to make that his whole house generator in the event of a power outage.
Ford does that too, right?
Ford does that too.
Yeah.
Here in Memphis, Tennessee, there was a big deal with the state to create the Blue Oval area, which was going to be where they're going to produce the electric EV trucks, the batteries, all the other stuff. And it was supposed to be going live now. And they just made an announcement that it's been delayed for at least 2 or 3 years.
Because it's just not working, or they're not selling?
I think that
there's a full size.
It's a full size, they're not selling. And the other thing is they're not sure. I'm sure they're not sure depending on who gets elected to office, where the government's really going to go with that. You know, is the mandate going to stick? Is it not? And a lot depends on who gets elected to office.
Well, I know that California, they have the mandate, right, 2035. But, you know, I had heard that people were like, well, you know, I'll just drive to Nevada and I'll buy a gas car and bring it back. But I think once you do that, you cross the...
I don't think they're going to allow you to register.
Yeah, or you have to pay, I assume, a big fine.
Yeah.
And then I also heard that since that they're not selling as much gas, they're not getting the taxes, so they're like, you know what, we're going to charge you, I don't know if this is true, we're going to charge you by how many miles you drive an extra tax because you're not...
But there's ways around a lot of that stuff. Example, classic cars. 25 years or older, you can bring a car into the country. So there's a business here in town, Duncan Imports, that imports a lot of the right-hand drive stuff. Yeah. And they're a dealership, and they sell them. And so I insure a lot of their clients. And when California comes to play, none of those vehicles will pass California emissions. So they have the secret sauce that they register in Montana, which is the tax haven for supercars and RVs, and we will insure it as a Montana vehicle garaged in California.
People always find a way around it.
So there's ways around a lot of that stuff now. Georgia cracked down on that a couple of years ago and impounded a bunch of supercars and motorhomes.
Impounded them?
Yeah, because it was tax evasion. Because the cars they could not prove the cars had ever been to Montana. They're not garaged in Montana. It was purely a ruse to,
wow, that's
avoid
amazing.
taxes on millions of dollars worth of cars.
Okay, so if you said you might have room for one more, maybe a parts car, but if it wasn't a parts car, what would be like the one dream car for you, money no option, that you could get and put right there?
So, Ferrari 458.
Okay.
I don't know.
You know exactly?
Yeah, the Ferrari 458 is probably one of the best normally aspirated Ferraris they ever made. It doesn't require a lot of maintenance. It's got a timing chain, no more belt out, engine out services. It's a car that you can actually do some of the work yourself, like brakes and things like that. So I'm a big DIYer.
Yeah, you too.
So I would do any of that stuff myself. But a 458 would be in there.
Would it be red?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And I'm normally a red interior person, but I would probably do a tan in the Ferrari.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, you notice almost all my cars have red interior. That's kind of
they do.
We just ordered a new Porsche Cayenne GTS, and it's blue with a red interior.
Red interior. Good choice.
My 911 is the only one that doesn't, and I wish I could.
Wish you could redo it. I mean, this one's kind of red. Is that like a dark brown?
Yeah.
We'll call that one like a
Bordeaux.
Yeah, Bordeaux. That's good.
So, but yeah, that and you know, I've always wanted a Porsche GT3 with the big arrow and the wing. If Porsche would sell, like the Corvette Grand Sport, a bodied vehicle that had the same horsepower as the normal vehicle, I would buy one of those all day long. I don't need the noisiness and the uncomfortable driving nature of a GT3. I need the big wing. I need the arrow.
A friend of ours, he ordered one of those, and I think it's been a couple years waiting.
Yeah.
It's a pretty serious car.
Yeah, one of my clients just got the GT3 RS.
Yeah, that's what he ordered.
Oh, yeah. What a great car.
What are those things, like 400,000 or something?
About 400 grand, yeah.
I like, guys in their cars, I love you can justify, and as a man or a woman, you can justify, it's like, I really need it, there's only a handful of them, and it's going to be worth this much more in 2 years. I mean, a $400,000 car, that's great. I love it.
I have this one client, this is a great story. I have this one client that his wife told him he could have one car. One fun car.
Yeah.
And so he bought a 67 GTO in cream yellow,
my favorite one,
black vinyl top. And then he went out without her knowledge and bought a 67 GTO convertible, cream with a black top. And he stores it elsewhere. And he'll switch them off periodically. And she doesn't know he bought another car.
Get out of here. But why?
Because he wants a convertible sometimes.
Sometimes he wants the hard. That's hilarious. Guys are so funny. That's hilarious.
It's like it was the point of, I'm going to have two cars.
Yeah. And she doesn't know.
No clue. Because she's just not a car person.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
It's amazing how many of those stories there are. But
I love it. Well, I thank you for having me over here. This was great.
Sure thing. No, anytime.
I love it. I love what you've got here. Like I said, I don't use it very often, but I'm a little jealous of your setup here.
Well, I'm jealous sometimes of my setup too.
This is great. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks.